Hello and welcome to another video. Today I thought I would talk about this slightly controversial topic of test knitting. I'm not sure why this is a controversial topic, but there's regularly on social media there's discussion about it. And I thought I would discuss some of the main issues around test knitting today and also how I approach it and what I think is important and what my views on this issue is. So if you've ever test knitted for a designer, let me know, or if it's been a test crochet or a test for a sewing pattern designer or anything like that, let me know in the comments below and share your experience, please. And tell me if you agree with what I say, or if you don't, tell me what you disagree with. I'd love to hear your views on this as well. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you're new here, my name is Anniken. I design knitting patterns. I teach knitting workshops online and in person, and I sell yarn through my website, YarnAddict.co.uk. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. It's August at the moment, and it is my birthday month, so I'm doing a special offer all month. You can get 15% off all my online courses, which includes, see if I can remember them all. It includes finishing techniques, continental knitting, successful lace knitting, successful brioche knitting, successful socks, and Scandinavian colorwork and steeking. That is it. So you can get 15% off all my online courses and off everything on my website, including yarn, notions, beads, and my books, Easy Lace Knits and Beaded Lace Knitting. And I'll put the code on the screen and it'll be in the description below as well, plus all the links will be below. So go to YarnAddict.co.uk. My online shop is there, and you can use the code birthday15, all one word, to get 15% off until the end of August. And if you go to my website, yarnaddict.co.uk, and click on workshops and online courses, you can see all my online courses and also see all my upcoming workshops as well. So I thought I would talk about test knitting and why it matters, or does it matter? I regularly see it discussed on social media. Sometimes I will chip in with my views on the topic, sometimes I won't, just because it can get a bit heated. Sometimes I'm not getting involved, and sometimes I do give my view. So I thought I would talk about things like, is test knitting essential? Why do people use test knitting? Why test knitting versus preview knitting, because there is a difference, I think, and test knitting versus tech editing, and also about test knitted compensation. So a few different issues surrounding test knitting, and I'll give you my view on it as well, and what I do at the moment and what I might do in the future. Now, I'm talking specifically about knitting because that's what I'm most familiar with, but testing happens in crochet. I've seen comments on Reddit, especially about sewing pattern designers using testers. So I'm assuming most people who design things will use some kind of testing. I've never actually done a test knit for anyone. I think when I started designing, if I had planned it a bit more and not just jumped in at the deep end head first like I tend to do, I probably should have volunteered to test knit a bit first, and maybe even try and get a job sample knitting for some designers, because I think I would have learned a lot from that. But I didn't do that because I'm an impatient person and I just tend to jump in head first, and that's what I did, and it worked out right. But I think I was lucky that I started when the online world was smaller. There weren't as many independent designers around. We didn't have social media like we do now, which obviously made things more challenging, but also easier in a way. But that's going slightly off topic. I do think that you can learn a lot from test knitting and or sample knitting, which are two different things. I'm not going to touch about sample knitting today. I'm mainly going to talk about test knitting. So many knitters view test knitting as an essential, and they will not buy a pattern unless it's been test knitted. And they're very skeptical to designers who don't test knit. They seem to think that if you don't test knit, then your pattern will be full of mistakes. I don't agree with that. And the reason I don't is because all patterns whether they are knitting, crochet, sewing, whatever they are, all instructions that you pay for, even if they're free, I guess, but especially instructions that you pay for to make something, should have been tech edited or checked by somebody. And I do know designers who don't use tech editors or test knitters, which I think is a bad idea. So the reason to test knit is to, one, make sure the instructions are clear and work across all the sizes in the pattern. So if it's an accessory, there might just be one size. If it's a garment, then obviously there'll be several sizes. So the idea of a test knit is to make sure that the instructions are clear by a range of different people, of hopefully different experience levels, and also if the pattern will produce the product that's being advertised. So if I photograph a particular thing, I'll just pick up this because this is right in front of me. If the pattern is a pattern for this cushion, which is called Diamonds Are Forever, then if you buy the pattern and knitted, you should end up with that cushion if you follow the instructions correctly and you knitted correct tension. That's the idea between a test knit, to make sure that that happens. Also, test knitters, and this is where there's a little bit of controversy, are used as a kind of promotional material for designers or as preview knitters. And this is where a lot of the problems with test knitting come in, because testers think their job is to test the pattern and feedback information to the designer to say, these are the mistakes I found, if I found any, these are the problems I had, this is where I think the pattern could be improved, the pattern doesn't fit, or whatever it is. And a lot of designers view test knitting as a form of preview knitting or promotional knitting. So before a pattern is sent out for test knitters, it should have been tech edited. All patterns should be tech edited. And in my opinion, and loads of designers share my view, I think tech editing is more important than test knitting. Tech editing means that my pattern should be as close to error-free as possible, and that it should work across all the sizes and produce the garment or item that is being advertised on the front page. That is the idea of tech editing. Now, we are all humans. We all make mistakes. Most of my patterns go back and forth between me and my tech editor, I would say at least 3 times. Even the easy ones are probably at least 2 or 3 times. At least twice. Most probably 3, 4, 5, 6. Hopefully by the time we get to version 5, we've finished it. But it goes back and forth between me and my tech editor several times. So she will get the pattern, she will go through it and mark any mistakes she finds and suggest corrections, or if I've made a mathematical error and things like that, she'll correct that. I will then get the pattern back, I will go through it, she marks up a PDF, I go through it and make those changes in the pattern, then I send version 2 back to her. She goes through it again and check that all my corrections are correct and see if she spots anything else. Then she sends it back to me. I do another go through and change, do all the edits, make all the corrections that she suggests. If I don't agree with them, I'll tell her why, and then we'll have a discussion. And it goes back and forth like that till she says, right, that's fine, ready to be published. And then I will still read through it a final time to see if I find anything. And there have been times after that process that there still are mistakes. I remember years ago, a lady who used to knit a lot of my patterns and a lot of my really complicated lace patterns, lace shawls. She was registered blind. And I'm just amazed at the some of my patterns that she could knit. It was just amazing. Blew my mind when I knew that she was registered blind. She emailed me once and said, are there any cast-off instructions in this pattern? She used some kind of app or device that read out the patterns for her. And she said, I don't know whether it's the formatting, and my Apple machine, I don't know what she used, doesn't pick it up. But she said, I can't find the cast-off instructions. And I'm like, of course there are cast-off instructions. But of course I looked at the pattern first before I emailed back. And I looked and there were no cast-off instructions. This is years ago now. but both me and my tech editor had completely missed the cast off instructions. It was a quite complex pattern, and I guess we were so busy getting everything else correct and making sure everything else was correct that you missed the really easy stuff. So mistakes happen, so I just emailed her and said, I'm terribly sorry, these are the cast off instructions, thank you for telling me. Sometimes knitters will find mistakes and just correct them. Don't contact a designer. If you find a mistake in my pattern, I would rather be told about it so I can correct it and upload a new version. And I find that really helpful. I've also had people who've emailed me and said, I found a mistake in your pattern. And they've even told me how to correct it. And it turns out that there wasn't a mistake and they're wrong. So that happens as well. But if you find a mistake in one of my patterns, I would rather you told me about it. But to me, a tech editor is the one that helps me make sure the pattern is as error-free as it possibly can be. But we're all humans and we all make mistakes. So a well tech edited pattern can still have mistakes. A pattern that's been test knitted can still have mistakes. I have used test knitters in the past on a few patterns, but I don't generally use test knitters, mainly because it's a lot of extra work. And last time I used test knitters, it wasn't a very good experience, and there was a pattern that had some mistakes in them and they weren't spotted. And I had a bit of problem with one particular test knitter that took up a lot of my time and effort, and I just sometimes find that the extra work for me isn't worth the benefits. Depending on what time of year it is and how many magazine deadlines I have and how many workshops I have, I juggle self-publishing with magazine publishing and working for young companies from time to time, and a lot of teaching. So if I'm in a period where I have a lot of teaching work and a lot of magazine designs, that has to take priority, and self-published patterns fit in around that, which is why I sometimes find it difficult to plan my self-published pattern schedule too far ahead of time. So if I, for example, design a new pattern, once I've designed it and knitted the sample, I'll finish the pattern, send it to my tech editor. It goes back and forth however many times, and then if I wanted to test knit it, that would be when I'd have it test knitted. But then I have to put out a call for test knitting. I have to go through all those applications as they come in, decide who is going to test knit, send out the pattern, be available to answer questions, get feedback from them, review that feedback and incorporate it into the pattern. Probably have my tech editor look at the pattern again, and it's a lot of work. And I don't feel it. I think if self-publishing was the only thing I did, I would do test knitting. But I do worry that there will be times when I will drop the ball on it, and it will cause me too much stress to incorporate it into everything else I do. I also have health problems, which obviously adds to the difficulty at times. I suffer from chronic pain, so I sometimes do have to really carefully manage my workload to get everything done. So I've decided for most of my patterns, test knitting isn't necessary and isn't necessarily beneficial to me. I do think it would be beneficial when it comes to promotional knitting. So test knitters are quite often used to provide promotional material, and this is where there's a lot of controversy and discussion among designers about whether that should be an expected thing or whether test knitting should even be used as a promotional thing. So many designers require test knitters to share the finished result on social media. For example, if I ask for testers for a particular garment that I designed, I would give you X number of weeks to knit that up. I would then expect you to send me photos or to share photos on your social media when I release the pattern. And because obviously we all want photos to look good on social media, a lot of designers are asking for people's social media accounts, and they will look at how many followers they have, the quality of their photos, what they look like, do they fit the image that the designer has for their patterns, all that kind of stuff. So, and a lot of test knitters or potential test knitters don't like that, because if you don't have a very big following and you don't really post a lot on social media, or you maybe don't even have a social media account where you post things, I have loads of people who follow me on Instagram who are knitters, but who don't actually post their knitting on Instagram very often. So they may have an Instagram account where they occasionally share photos, but they don't necessarily share a lot of photos of their knitting. And the people who follow them may not be knitters, it might just be family and friends. So having them share photos of a test knit they've done for me wouldn't be that beneficial, because their followers wouldn't necessarily be interested. If they took great photographs, it would be beneficial for me, because I would be able to show my design on body types and different looks in terms of skin color, hair color, age, all that kind of thing. I would be able to show my pattern on a more diverse range of people. But it would then be marketing knitting, not test knitting. I would say that most test knitting these days is really preview promotional knitting, not testing in the strictest sense. And most designers do it because they want the photos to share on social media, and they want test knitters to help them promote the pattern. Lately, there's been discussion, in view of what I've just said, about whether test knitting should be free or whether test knitters should be paid. Most designers don't make enough money from designing to pay test knitters. A lot of designers think that test knitters should be paid, and think it's unethical to do test knitting without paying the test knitter. A lot of knitters think that as well. The standard compensation for test knitting is that you get the final pattern for free. So if I ask you to test knit a pattern, I will send you the pattern, and then once I get all the results back from the test knit, if I need to update the pattern, I will do. Then I'll send you a copy of the final version when it's published. Some designers might offer another free pattern from their collection for free. Obviously, a pattern, my pattern sell for £5. That's not a lot of work. You obviously also get to keep the item. So I assumed if you were going to volunteer to test knit, you would test knit for something that you wanted to knit anyway. And you basically just get the pattern for free. But most test knitters have to pay for their own yarn. I could, if I, say for example, I designed a couple of crochet garments recently in a yarn that I can get wholesale. So I can see if I decide to get those test knitted, which I probably will do, because I haven't done a lot of crochet designs in the last few years. So I'm a little bit rusty on the whole pattern writing. So I can see in that case, it would be beneficial for me to, once I've got a tech editor, to get it test knitted, so that I can get feedback on my pattern writing style and that kind of thing. And I could see myself then saying, because I can get the yarn wholesale, to say, if you'd like to use this yarn, let me know which color you want and which size you're going to knit, and I will order the yarn for you, and you can pay wholesale for the yarn. I still don't think I'd be able to do it for free, because I don't know how much the pattern is going to sell, and I also got to pay the tech editor, and you will be knitting something you will get to keep. But I think being able to get somebody the yarn at wholesale price, if they wanted it, would be the best I would be able to do. Obviously, people can choose to knit from their stash, which would be fine. Some designers have, you have to use the yarn that they used, which I think is a bit restrictive. There's also been discussions about how long designers allow for test knitting. Obviously, if you have inclusive patterns that include size inclusive patterns that go up to larger sizes, it's going to take more to knit. I know how long it takes me to knit a garment in my size, and I know that I knit more than the average knitter. So I would need to allow quite a bit more for that garment to be test knitted in my size and sizes above my size. And whereas it might be acceptable to have a sample test knit in size 10, for example, in UK size 10, 4 weeks might be acceptable. For a size like my size and above, you might need 8 weeks, even 12 weeks. Some people are insisting on very long test knitting deadlines, which I don't think is always that easy from the designer's point of view. It depends on how far ahead the designer works. But there is a lot of discussion about deadlines. And lately, there's been some designers who've had some rather silly rules. Very short deadlines, very short time between the end of the test and the pattern release. Like, test will finish on a Monday and the pattern is released on a Wednesday. There's like one full day in between, which isn't really enough, I would say, unless it's a very simple pattern with only a few testers. I would say that that probably isn't enough to take everyone's feedback into account, and also allow for anyone finishing late and take their views into account. And there's also some designers who have punishment if somebody fails to complete a test. And some designers will charge people for the patterns. So if I ask for volunteers to test and enroll in my patterns, you volunteer, but things happen, you get other things happen, you get ill, somebody close to you get ill, you have more work on, you have to work extra hours, anything could happen. You can fall and break your arm and not be able to knit for 2 months. Life happens. Or you might decide you're not just enjoying it and you decide you don't want to carry on and complete the test net. Some designers in that case are saying you have to pay for the pattern, or you have to compensate me in another way. And I've seen some ridiculous things, mainly on Reddit. People like calling out designers who have ridiculous expectations and ideas. I would say if somebody volunteered to test it for me, if they couldn't complete it, I would say, if you can't complete it, let me know as soon as possible. And I would probably say, well, if you complete it in the future, let me know. But, I need to go ahead and publish the pattern. But I certainly wouldn't punish them for doing it. If you had somebody who volunteered for test knitting several times and struggled to complete it, you might sort of say, okay, next time I ask the test knitters, I will not include that person because they never complete. So lots of stuff here about test knitting versus preview knitting. Have you done any test knitting? Did you enjoy it? Did you like it? What are your kind of red lines when it comes to test knitting? Do you think that unless it's paid, you wouldn't do it? My view is that if all the information is available up front, if I say, right, I'm looking for test knitters, these are my conditions, this is what you can expect as a test knitter, and this is what I expect as a designer. If you volunteer to do it, that's fine. And I don't understand why other people get so angry about it. I've seen people, especially on social media and Reddit, really complain about designers who they think are taking advantage of test knitters. But if the test knitters knew the conditions going into it and they're happy with that, why is it anyone else's business? What I'm willing to do may not be the same as what you're willing to do. But if I know the conditions up front and I'm willing to do that, and I don't see a problem with that. So let me know if you would test knit. Have you test knitted? Was it a pleasant experience? Was it a bad experience? If you're a designer, let me know, do you use test knitters? Do you think they're essential? Do you think they're an optional extra, which is nice to have? I am planning some garments that I will probably have tested, but I need to write up the patterns first. And as we know, if you're a regular viewer, I do have a bit of a backlog, which I'm planning to start working on next week, I think. I don't think the benefit of having every one of my patterns test knitted would help me outweigh the extra work it would give me. But I am thinking about it. So let me know in the comments what your views on all this is. Don't forget, if you're interested in 50% off my online courses and my website, all the details are in the description box below. The code is birthday15, all one word, valid until the end of August. And go to YarnAddict.co.uk. You can find my online shop and all my online courses there. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed yet, please consider subscribing. Thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you next time.